It's great for us to be here. We have looked forward to this for quite some time. Appreciate Luke asking us. I can't remember how long ago it's been now. It's been quite a while since we were asked, but we are glad to be here. And he mentioned that if we go to, polish the pulpit or somewhere, and he's always seeing like my head and the family things. That's true. And it's because we don't know what we're doing either. Okay? Years ago, and I can't remember how long ago it was now. I meant to look it up before we came, I just forgot. But Leah and I were asked to do, the first time ever asked to do like a weekend, parenting or marriage sort of thing or whatever. We'd never been asked, never we put it out there. We wanted to do that sort of thing, but a congregation that we knew, because it was the one where I grew up, asked if we would come and do that. They said, now you have to give it a name, because we can put it on flyer. We didn't know we were going to be doing anything like that, so we workshopped a name. We actually settled on Struggling Family Helping Struggling Families. That was the name of the weekend. Because just because we drove however many hours it was to get here, and just because we write about this stuff and podcast about this stuff, doesn't mean we get it right. We're just the ones who are gutsy enough to stand up here and talk about it. That's really what it boils down to. We do a lot of things with families, marriage and parenting, because we believe in marriages and families. And because we struggle, we don't get it right all the time for sure. We're here for the weekend. By that I mean we're here to speak, but also we're here to listen, to talk, to I would say counsel, but again we don't have any idea what we're doing either. So we're willing to talk and help. But we are yours for the weekend, and we're glad to be here with you. Before I get into this first lesson, we always have to do this. We have to set the rules. There are rules for this weekend, and they're very, very, very simple. Okay, rule number 1. This is allowed. Okay. Rule number 2. This is allowed. Rule number 3. This is not allowed. Okay. Now, we've had to alter that rule because about 3 years ago, I guess, we were doing a seminar near Cincinnati on the Kentucky side of the river, and we gave the rules, and that's the way it was. And at lunch on Saturday, we were sitting across the table from a couple who live in America, but they're originally from India and still have, and I'm not going to do the accent, but just picture in mind, it's extremely heavily accent. Like you have to really work to understand them because they're still that deeply embedded in the accent. And the husband said, I don't like your rules. And I'm going, I don't know this person at all. I didn't know anybody at this church. I'm like, okay, whatever. I said, what do you mean? He said, when you were talking about the rules, you said, don't do this. He said, you did not say, don't do this. And his wife actually was doing that to him. So we are adding that rule also. Kicking is also not allowed this weekend. So why are we the way we are? This lesson, to begin with, I hope you're going to find to be a lot of fun. And it's really the lesson this weekend. We have to give this rule of this. But this is what's fascinating to me. This is a lesson that I've altered a bunch of times. We've done several times in different settings. And here's what's fascinating. Every time, and I mean that literally, every time that I've spoken on this at any congregation or any retreat or anything else, I've seen the face. Here's the face. I've seen it. Because something hit about why a spouse, why a child is the way that they are. Now, let me say from the outset, I don't believe that everything about us is just predetermined. There's nothing we can ever do to change ourselves. But it is true that each and every one of us has some unique qualities, some things in our past, some things that are just built in through DNA, etc., that make us who we are. Just those traits that make us different. And different isn't bad. Different is a good thing. I'm glad I married a woman. Okay? That's a difference. I'm glad for her. And we also know that opposites often attract. Okay? And here's the thing in marriage. The stuff that was so cute because it was different when you were dating, I don't have to finish that sentence, do I? Becomes the stuff that frustrates you after 5 or 10 or 15 years of marriage. Like, why are you always so late? I was late when we were dating too. I just was gussying myself up and now I'm wearing my bathrobe. Okay? So that's the deal. There are differences in each one of us. Some people are very outward emotionally. Others are they're emotional, but they're very quiet emotionally. There's nothing wrong with either one of those things. There are some people who are very, very organized down to the very last detail, and there are others who think that's just boring and that's a way to waste your life. There are some people who are very, very quiet, and there are people who think that quiet is the enemy. You know those people, all right? I want us to think about some things that are very practical where that comes from. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you that this lesson is I'm going to use the phrase adapted. It's very heavily adapted from a book. You may have seen it. I've been told, I haven't flown in years, okay, but I've been told you can find it like in every airline bookstore. I don't know why. It's by an author named Kevin Leman. He's not a member of the Lord's Church, but he writes from a Christian perspective. He's a psychologist. And he writes a series of books you may have seen. They're called Have a New Something by Friday. There's Have a New You by Friday. There's Have a New Child by Friday. Have a New Kid by Friday. And there's Have a New Family by Friday. That's where I got the title for this. Some of this is from his book. I mean, one of those books. I'm giving him credit for it. But I've highly adapted it. But I also recommend the book. Not because I agree with everything in it. I don't. But because it's extremely practical. And most of the stuff in it is written from a Christian perspective. What we're going to talk about tonight are three different things that are just sort of built into us, that make us who we are, that make your spouse different from you, make your children different from each other. You ever had the saying where you've gone, that's really loud, they were raised in the same house, what makes them so different? Okay, we're going to talk about some of that stuff. None of these are hard and fast. In fact, I'm going to share with you a couple that I break the rules on. In other words, that where I see myself, which is not true of me. Here's number one. Number one is your birth order. Firstborn, secondborn, lastborn, only children, that sort of thing. None of these are hard and fast, okay? But it is interesting to go through people who do things like psychological analysis and counseling and things and hear them write about and talk about how there are certain things that firstborns, for example, hold to be similar. Lastborns hold to be similar. Only children hold to be similar. Okay? For example, who's our firstborns in here? Be proud. Okay, I'm not one. Put my hand down. All right. Now, this is where I have to remind you, this is not allowed. Okay? Not all of, but a majority of the presidents of the United States have been firstborn children. Nearly every American astronaut was a firstborn, or is a firstborn. Most, notice this word, non-fiction authors. Not fiction authors. Non-fiction. Real stories, tell us the truth, are firstborns. If you find the president of a large corporation, a lot of airline pilots, accountants, very often are firstborn. What do those jobs or roles have in common? Organization and being in charge. Right? Any job that requires tenacity and a level of organization and that the person will actually enjoy it is probably best filled by a firstborn child. That's typically the way it is. Even when they're kids, okay? If you have more than one child, especially if they're a little bit older, in other words, if you kind of had a chance to develop their personality a little bit, just think through some of this. This is not going to be true across the board, but just think if it's not true across several children that you know who are firstborn. When they're children, these are the ones typically who want to make sure their hair is always in place. They're the child, if you have 3 or 4 kids, they're the child whose clothes are going to match by their choice. They want to make sure the outfit is exactly right. Even if it's not a perfect outfit, it's going to look good. They're going to make sure it looks good. These are the grown men who want to shine their shoes. They're nuts. I hate, by the way, I'm a lastborn. I'm the second of 2. I hate shining my shoes. I think it's a waste of time. But if you find a man who enjoys shining his shoes, he's probably either a firstborn or an only. My dad is an only. He has shined his shoes every Saturday since he was in his 20s because it's part of it just being right. These are the people who use calendars, to-do lists, and schedules as if it's religious. Now, this is where I break the mold. I'm a second-born, and my wife hates the fact that I love the calendar and the to-do list as much as I do. I am nuts about it. But typically, that's a firstborn trait. Now, I think that's, by the way, I think in my case, the reason for that is my sister, who's the firstborn, is not that way. I think I overcompensated through the years. I really do. Because she's like, 5 o'clock means somewhere between 5 and midnight. We're good. And I'm like, no, 5 o'clock means 4:55. Right? Couples, let's just be honest. One of you is always on time. And by on time, you mean 5 to 10 minutes early, just in case something happens on the way there. The other one probably says 5 o'clock means they wouldn't expect us before 5:15, or they wouldn't have said 5. Am I right? See, I got the look. I got it. Guess what? The one who's probably the on-time person, there's a really good chance is a firstborn. It's not always the case, but it's very often the case. Okay? A firstborn typically is not afraid to shake your hand. It sounds like I'm playing drums in the auditorium. We're not playing drums in the Church of Christ, for those who are watching on live stream, by the way. They're not afraid. Wow. They're not afraid to shake your hand, look you in the eye the first time, because they have confidence. They're very good at that. In Dr. Lehman's book, he says this: I call firstborn children adults in kids' bodies. They are known for being capable, hard-driving, perfectionistic, exacting, exhaustingly logical, scholarly, and organized. Now, is there some positive about that? Yes. There's some extreme positives with that. We need organization in our world. Every firstborn says amen, right? We need it. If we didn't have it, the world would be totally chaotic. The family would be the marriage would be chaotic. The church would be chaotic if there was no organization. It is good for someone to have confidence, not arrogance, but confidence. That's a good thing. Can it be negative? Yeah. Sometimes firstborns, because you don't follow with what they want, become micromanagers. They decide, we'll make sure it gets done, and I'll make sure you do it the right way, and the right way is my way, right? Sometimes it comes across as arrogance, even if it's not arrogance, and firstborns typically have the most narcissistic traits because it becomes arrogance, because I did it right, and guess which way is right? My way. Okay, that's your firstborns. Some famous firstborns from history. Oprah Winfrey was a firstborn, is a firstborn. Winston Churchill, Dan Rather, George W. Bush, Oprah Winfrey, I mentioned her already. Peter in the Bible was a firstborn, of course. Joe Biden is a firstborn, and so is Kamala Harris, both firstborns. All right? Do I have any only children here? Any onlys? Oh, man, onlys are so much fun. But since we don't have any, I'll just run through this quickly. They're like firstborns on steroids, okay? But a lot of scholars are firstborn children. Firstborn, or onlys, I should say. The struggle that onlys often face is because they don't have a balance in their family with dealing with another sibling. They often see the world only as right and wrong. There is no gray area. Everything is here or here, and there is nothing in the middle. And they struggle in the world for that quite often because they can't see nuance, as well as other people who've had to think through childhood issues at home and dealing with struggles and dealing with, hey, this kid beat me up. Yeah, but you were being a jerk. They didn't have to deal with that. Everything was exactly the way they wanted it to be most of the time. Onlys struggle with small talk. Why in the world are you trying to figure out where you want to go for lunch? Just go eat some lunch. Right? That's the way they see the world. If they're not careful, they can be demanding. They can be unforgiving because, again, there's no gray area. It's either right or wrong. On a positive side, they see injustice in a good way, and they know right from wrong, so they deal with it that way. Some famous only children, by the way: Franklin Delano Roosevelt was an only child. William Shatner, I will not do my impression because I can't, was an only child. Robin Williams, the comedian. Joe Montana, Leonardo da Vinci. So far as we know, John the Baptist was an only child. All right, babies, the family, last-born children. Where you at? See, I got it that time too, Leah. I got the one who went. Last-borns. Me too. Grow up with a natural sense of entitlement. From the outset, they're special, and often they'll make sure to let you know they're special. They're babied not only by their parents, but often by their siblings. And because of that, lastborns often become people. They are more often regular to be extroverts than introverts. Again, I break the mold. I'm extremely introverted. That seems strange from standing up here doing this, but introversion does not mean you hate people. Okay? Introversion means people drain you. Being around people makes you tired. Okay? Extroversion doesn't mean you love people. It just means you get your energy from people, from interacting with people. Here's a test. If you've ever been at a seminar or some kind of gathering where people had to wear name tags, and someone walked up to you, and on their name tag they had something like Chrissy or Robbie or Bobby, or what's my other example? Missy, there's a really good chance that's a last-born child. Do you know why? Because it sounds fun. If it's a firstborn child, they've probably either shortened it officially or even legally to something like Rob or Bob or Chris, because it's short and to the point. Is it always the case? No, but you run the numbers, it gets really interesting really fast, that the Robbies and Bobbies and Missies and Chrissies probably are the babies of the family. Often, lastborns have an I'm going to show the world mentality. Especially if they've been told something like, you're so short, or you're so tall, or you're so fast, or you're so slow. If they've been told something, you're so something, lastborns develop an I'm going to show the world mentality. And I'm going to show them by what I do. If you run a business and you want a good salesperson, hire a lastborn, because they're people. They make you feel comfortable. They'll talk to you and make sure you know how great of a salesperson they are, up to all of a sudden you financed a $100,000 car you didn't know you needed, because they just made you feel that good. They very often are the life of the party. Some famous lastborns: Jim Carrey, Eddie Murphy, Margaret Thatcher, Cameron Diaz, Sir Laurence Olivier, Halle Berry. In the Bible, Andrew, and many others. Middle children. Any middles? I know one because I'm married to her. All right, middles. They can go a lot of different directions. Very often, though not always, they go completely away from what the oldest child is known for. For example, if the oldest child is a star athlete, the middle child still wants to be a star, but maybe not in athletics. They may want to star in being a scholar, or maybe in home economics, or maybe in music or drama, because they don't want to try to compete, but they still want to carve out their own place. Middles, this is where I get in trouble with the one I'm married to, are highly competitive people. Highly competitive people, okay? And the reason is understandable. They feel like they have to compete against the oldest, especially if the oldest is really, really good at something, but they're also not the baby of the family who everyone's going, oh, isn't she cute? Isn't he cute? And they're in the middle. Which I try to remind my wife, the best part of an Oreo cookie is the chocolate. No, it's the middle, right? But even though they're competitive, middles usually are great team players if they keep it under control, because they feel a sense of loyalty. They've got someone older to think about and someone younger to think about. And so they can show a great deal of loyalty within that family if they keep things. They're also known for being dependable, because they feel like they have to take care of everything all the time. Some famous middle children. Our first president, George Washington, was a middle child. George H.W. Bush. Princess Diana was a middle child. And while he wasn't in the middle of just three, of course, Joseph in the Old Testament was. By the way, if you're wondering, Donald Trump is the fourth of five. He's sort of a middle. So there's your Kamala Harris first child, Donald Trump fourth of five, and vote for whoever you want to on Tuesday. I don't care. Anyway, now, are there some exceptions? Yes. Are there some things that can easily change that? Yes. What if you adopt a child? That can very easily change that. We know that. Our oldest is adopted. Our youngest is not. Our oldest is the third of three. So is she the baby or the firstborn? Yes. She shows traits of both. So our youngest is also our oldest. And guess what? He shows traits of both, because he's the oldest from us, but the youngest of the two. Some other things that can change it, and some of these are not as positive. Obviously, the death of a parent can very much change this, because now the children feel different roles in the family. A blended family can change it. Or what if a family has a child and doesn't have the second one for 8 or 9 or 10 years later? Well, you sort of have two firstborns at that point in time. What about the death of a child that sort of disrupts the flow of this first, middle, youngest? And there are many very, very large families often show traits. If you have 7 or 8 or 9 children, sometimes you'll basically have like 2 or 3 sets of 3. And it's interesting, sometimes, I haven't studied this as much, maybe I should, but I've been told by people that families that have multiples of 3, like 6 children, 9 children, whatever, that they almost can go oldest, middle, youngest, oldest, middle, youngest, oldest, middle, youngest. It's very interesting. I haven't studied as much as I want to, but I've heard people anecdotally say that their 4th and their 7th are sort of like their 1st, and their 6th and their 9th are kind of like their 3rd. And so that's how tied to it is. So birth order matters. I promise the other two are shorter because I'm hungry too. All right. Number two. What is this person's main character trait? Now, that sounds like a very odd thing to say, but this really does come from Dr. Lehman's book a lot. He suggests that every person has one dominant character trait. And when I start naming these, you're going to go, yeah. And here's what's interesting. You're probably going to recognize your spouse's before you recognize your own. Okay? Here's number 1. The controller. Now don't be going, it's not a bad word, okay? Not controller as in control freak. That's not what we said. Now it can become that, but a controller. The reason we could say this is not always negative is this could be the mom who's always planning the play dates for the neighborhood kids. That's a good use of being a controller. Okay? If you have somebody here at this congregation who you figure out's a controller, that's the best person to be in charge of Vacation Bible School. The best one. Because every detail will be taken care of. And you won't have to think a thing about it again, except maybe they might have spent $5,000 more than you wanted them to get there. Okay? Controllers, the way you know them is this. They have extremely high expectations of themselves. They hold themselves to a standard that's not impossible, but you are pushing, this is the phrase, you're pushing yourself too hard. These are the people you've told that to. Now, what can make it negative is they also have very high expectations of everybody else. Now, it's good to think people can do good things. It's good to think people can do bigger things than they can do. But it's not a good thing to hold people to a standard you've set for them when you don't know them. And if that person's your spouse, you got problems. Not that your spouse wants you to do better, but that your spouse wants you to meet expectations that they've set that you don't even know exist. Can we do this with kids? You better believe we can do this with kids. You're going to be the star of the football team. Dad, I'm 5'2" and weigh 83 pounds. I'm in the 3rd grade. What are you talking about? And we push because that's our expectation. And that's the kid who at about 15, 16 years old quits football not because he doesn't love football, but because he hates the expectations that are put on him when he was 6 years old. Now, the controller can be a good thing. They feel a great sense of accomplishment when they finish something, or when a group they're leading finishes something. But they have to be very careful. These are the people who hear this phrase more than anybody else. Lighten up. Lighten up. Or you're pushing everybody too hard. Trait number 2, the pleaser. The pleaser. This is the person who always takes the blame, even if it's not their fault. They don't want to deal with confrontation at all. They despise confrontation. Guilty as charged. This is me. Man, I would rather drill my own teeth than face confrontation of any kind. I can't stand it. It drives me crazy. As a preacher, that's a very difficult thing, I'll tell you. Because there are times you have to have very difficult conversations with people. And those are the worst days I face. Because I just know this is going to be good, and it's probably my fault. I mean, he cheated on his wife, and somehow it's my fault. It's that deep sometimes. This is also sort of backwards because women are more likely to be pleasers than men are because they take on the emotions of the other people. A lot of men don't want to admit they're pleasers because it doesn't sound masculine. And so they feel forced to be one of the others we'll talk about. If you have a child who's a pleaser, especially if it's a girl, they can be very easily manipulated because people figure out that they'll take the blame. They'll take the fall for something. And you have to be willing to teach that child, no, you may have had something to do with this, but this is not your fault. And we're going to work through that. A major issue with pleasers is that a lot of them figure their self-worth is only based on how others see them perform. How do I look to other people? That's a very dangerous line to walk. It's not all bad because reputation matters, integrity matters, right? But if that's where I set my self-esteem is how other people view me, that's a dangerous line to walk. Trait number 3, the charmer. The charmer. You might want to choose the word show off, but that's going too far. This is just someone who gets their oxygen from the attention of other people. They want people to enjoy life. They want people to laugh, for example, or just to feel emotion. This is the person, and you may be married to one, who can tell you every detail of something that happened when they were 8 years old because everybody in the room laughed, and it wasn't like a performance. It was something that happened in the living room. But they can tell you what their mom was wearing when that happened because they told the joke that made everybody laugh. And that's what gave them their oxygen. They charmed the room. And they remember that vividly. It's not forced celebrity. It's craving making other people feel something, especially making them feel good. What depresses a charmer is not a lack of laughs, it's being ignored. It's being ignored. They would rather, and I'm using the word performance here, not as in standing on stage. I'm talking about even just laughing in the living room or at a table at a restaurant or whatever. They would rather that performance bomb than there not be one at all. They want everybody around the table laughing, or everyone in the living room laughing, or feeling something, or telling stories, or having a great time. These people can, by the way, if they're balanced with a good organizer, these people can be great people in hospitality. Because they're going to make you open up and tell stories and laugh and all that sort of thing. That's a good thing. They can pout when they don't get their way. Don't do this. Remember the rules. Okay. Number 4, the victim. The victim. The most common group of victims are middle children because they feel they've gotten a raw deal in life. They're not the star like the older child. They're not as babied as the baby. And so they feel like they've gotten a raw deal. But here's the good thing if you're a victim. They see injustice. These are the people who will come to elders of the church and say something in a good way. This isn't fair. This is the child that will come to their parents in a very honest way and say, this isn't fair. And they're right. A vast majority of the time, they're right. Because they can almost just innately sense something is not just. Something is not just right about this situation. But if it's left unchecked, in other words, if it's not tempered with a biblical worldview and seeing things the right way, what can often happen then is everything becomes unjust and they go through life with an unending pity party. That ain't very much fun to deal with. That everything is just wrong with everything. Well, no, that's just not true. And we have to be careful to temper that. So if you can see that dominant trait, you understand your spouse, your children better. Here's thing number 3, and you've probably studied this before to some degree, so go through this one even faster. What is their love language? Anybody read 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman? If you haven't, do. Again, I don't recommend everything in the book. In fact, there's a lot in that book I don't recommend, but the overall flow of the book is important and it's fascinating. The premise of the book is simply this. All of us feel love, of course. All of us can be loved. And the five love languages, I'll name them in a second. We all feel love from them, gain love from them to some degree. But each one of us feels the most loved by one of them in specific. Do you want to know your spouse better? Here's how you do it. How they try to show you love is their dominant love language. Okay? Here are the 5. Number 1, words of affirmation. That doesn't mean flattery, because flattery is a sin. You don't make it up. But it means sincere and thoughtful complimenting. Those couple of words are very important. Sincere, obviously, I mean it, but also thoughtful. If your spouse or a child, their love language is words of affirmation, it's fine and it's good to give them an attaboy, attagirl, great job, whatever. But it means even more if it's thoughtful. You did a great job with fill in the blank. It meant a lot when you fill in the blank. When you made this meal, it made me feel wonderful, love, whatever. Thoughtful. Some people, their number 1 love language is words that just build them up, that affirm them. Number 2, quality time. Quality time. This is when you talk to your spouse or with one of your children as if they're the only person in the world. They truly have your undivided attention, which means those buzzing computers in your purse and your phone have to be put away for a little while. If this is your love language, this is your spouse's love language or one of your children's love language, and it's not yours, you have to work like a dog to make this one work. Because they have to know they are the only person for the next few minutes that you're thinking about. This is actually a very common one that is most often overlooked. These are the people who feel the most loved when you do something that they want to do. And it may be something that you don't necessarily like all that much. Doesn't have to be anything expensive, but just an experience or a food or a conversation you didn't really want to have all that much, about something you don't care about at all, right? But this is us right now. Spouse or child, it's just us. Number 3 is receiving gifts. Now, when I say that, every husband goes, I bet that's my wife's. It's more common for men than women, and it's not close. It's not close. Now, guys, it doesn't mean don't ever buy your wife anything again. I didn't say that, okay? All right? Remember, this is the primary love language. We all have all 5. But the number 1 for certain people, it's actually more common for it to be true of a man than a woman that receiving a gift is his number 1 love language. This is just my speculation. I've looked at this some. This is my speculation. That's all it is. I think the reason is because men spend so much of their time being told you have to earn money, you have to do this stuff to make sure your family has this and 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 this, that when someone actually gives him something, he can't believe it. Because he spent so much of his life, his energy, his time, his effort gaining so they can have stuff that now someone's actually thought of him. That's, again, just speculation. That's the only reason I can think of why this would be number 1 for a lot of men. But the gifts don't have to be expensive, thank goodness. Okay? It's the what that counts. And that's true, isn't it? If this is your love language, that's true. It's not the dollar signs that matter. It's that you thought through something that I really wanted. Or something that really means, even something that's not expensive at all, but is sentimental to me. You thought through that. Number 4, acts of service. This is mine, Leah. No, she knows that. Acts of service. It's similar to gifts, but it's not the money. It's the fact that they did something for you. They took the time to take something off of you that you needed to do, and they did it for you, or they just did something that helped you without really wanting anything in return. There are some people that means more to them. And speaking of experience, this is mine. Sometimes people who this is their love language have trouble saying thank you. Not because they're not grateful, but because it's just almost a shock to them that someone did something for them without wanting anything in return. That's not the world we live in, is it? And so when that's your love language, it's almost shocking when it actually happens. This is the kid, by the way, who may be a little too old, quote unquote, but still likes it that mom fixes their lunch to go to school. They may not say it, but they love it because mom has done something for them. And mom has really thought through that I like this little dessert, not that little dessert, and put it in the bag. Okay? Number 5 is physical touch. Notice it doesn't say sexual touch, just physical touch. There are some people, their number one love language is just knowing there's a hand to hold, or a hand on the shoulder, or a pat on the back. And yes, sometimes it is sexual, but most of the time it's just, I'm here. I'm just going to put my hand in the small of your back as you walk to the door, or my hand on your shoulder, or we're going to hold hands walking down the street, or through the mall, or wherever you happen to go, or kiss you on the cheek, or just that physical touch. We're together is the number one love language for them. Now, this matters for us as couples, but it also matters for those of us who have children. Because as I said, the struggle is, I know how I feel the most loved. So guess what I think it should be for everybody else? I'll just do stuff for them because that's my number one love language. It's not hers. And it's not either one of my child's. Not children's, my child. Either one of my kids. It's not either one of them. Okay? They're appreciative when I do stuff for them. But I could wear myself completely out doing stuff for them and then never feel as fully loved as if I just simply said, I love you. And so whatever your love language is, yes, do that because you're good at it. But notice the other person and say, how do I most show that person love? How do I most show that kid that I love her or love him? I think, and I may be wrong, our son, who's 17, I think his is words of affirmation. He's an outgoing kid, and he likes it when people do stuff for him or buy him something or whatever, but he can live a week on a great compliment. You can just see it. And it's especially true if he's having a difficult time. If you really going through something rough, some kid hadn't treated him right, they're kids, teenagers, drama, something hadn't happened, but you spend a couple of minutes with him and tell him something he's really good at or something he's really done well. You can see him physically, the air in his lungs. Now, he appreciates other stuff. Our daughter's interesting. She's adopted. Hers, I don't know which one is number one. She's 19. And it's because of a mixture of a lot of things. I think one of hers, not the only one, I think one of hers is acts of service. Thankfully, because I know how to do that. Here's the reason why. The night before she started school, not her senior year, school, kindergarten, I took her on our first daddy-daughter date. She remembers every detail. And when I say every detail, I don't mean, well, we went to eat somewhere. No. We ate at Chick-fil-A, and to this day, when we go to a Chick-fil-A that has the same layout, she can tell you the table we sat at. I don't remember that. I know we went to Chick-fil-A, and I know I bought her a dress afterwards, one of the cheapest, anyway. But she remembers everything. But she also can live a long time with giving back rubs and stuff. I hate massages, okay? I do not want someone's hands on my shoulders because I think they're about to kill me because that's what it feels like when they... By the way, one other thing just know about me, if you say, I know a good chiropractor, I don't want to know them. I don't pay someone to crack my neck, okay? That's just not the way this works. I've had it happen, and it's helpful sometimes. That's a scary deal. She loves that stuff, okay? Knowing that, though, I've given a few terrible back rubs or shoulder rubs in my day. I'm terrible at it because I hate it. But you could feel her Daddy loves me. You have to think through the other person's eyes. Now, are there other things that change our families? Yeah. But did some of this open your eyes a little bit to your spouse or to your kids? Just a little bit? Just an insight? Because each of us often, and I've hinted this at the end, each of us often look at the world through our own glasses. I'm a this, and I'm a this, so that's the way everybody else in the world is. Thank goodness they're not. Well, this would be a really boring world. But then when you live with someone for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, or you're raising kids for a couple of decades in the house, this is where the nye comes from, because we're a family. We're all supposed to be alike, and we're not. But when we begin to see the beauty that comes from these differences and how to work those things to where this is a strength, this is a weakness, so this is a strength and this is a weakness, that's where a stronger family develops in and around the home. So I hope these things have kind of given you, some fun things. We're getting ready to go eat in a minute, so if I didn't give right rules or something, that's fine. I told you not to kick her elbow. Somebody may have thought of something else to do in the last 40 minutes. I get that. So, we're all creative. But like I said at the beginning, we're here for you this weekend. We do not want to be the couple that rolls into town, expounds wonderfully about family, and then rolls out of town. Okay, we don't get everything right. Our daughter, who's 19 right now, is going through a very difficult time. We've gone through all kinds of stuff as a couple. Okay. We're not speaking from follow us and we'll show you what it means to be a great family. We're willing to speak saying we don't always get this right, but we love God and His role for the family enough that we'll stand up and talk about it, even if we don't always get it right. So I hope these things encourage you. Thank you for your attention or for falling asleep, whatever you did the last few minutes. And I think after a meal, the classes are split, so I'll let Luke explain that. But thank you for your attention the last several minutes. I'm going to leave this up here and so turn the microphone off so it doesn't explode on you.